Thank you, Peter.
You're very, very welcome, OJ. I'm so excited and proud of being able to hold up a mirror to remind you of how great you are. And I see something in you that I see rarely in young individuals that have that spark, that desire, that I want to go out and make a difference. I want to go and do something that allows me to live the life I was born to live and not settle for the one that I was expected to live.
Hello, guys. OJ here, young and upcoming entrepreneur. Today, I'm sitting down with a man who's helped thousands of entrepreneurs rewire their mindset from the inside out. A man who's hit rock bottom but refused to give up on multiple occasions. 6 times TEDx speaker, best-selling author of The Inside Track, and mentor to many, the one and only Peter Sage.
OJ, what a real pleasure to see you again. It's been a while since we connected in Antigua.
Yes, it's an honor to be able to have this conversation with you today. Thank you for sharing your time with me.
You're very welcome. How can I add some value?
So, the wisdom and experience that you hold within you as an 8-figure entrepreneur and human behavior expert is outstanding and like no other. Tell us, how has the process been like for you getting to where you are now from where you started?
So essentially, you want my life story in 2 minutes. No, I'll give a little bit of backstory first for people that aren't familiar with me and my work. Obviously, I'm just a guy. I dropped out of school at 16. I've got no formal qualifications. I started my first business at 17, which was selling toys on car boot sales and flea markets. And what I did have was not a skill set around business. I couldn't spell MBA, right?
Yes.
What I had instead was something much more valuable. I had the mindset that was required to be an entrepreneur. And what does that include? It includes understanding that my profession isn't what most people call a profession. A lot of people have a profession. I'm a carpenter, I'm a welder, I'm a, whatever it may be, I'm a chef, I'm a dentist. They're professions which are essentially technician-based professions. My profession is I'm an entrepreneur. That's it. I'm not affiliated to a specific industry. I'm affiliated to being able to spot, capitalize on opportunity. And when you shift your identity from being a technician who wants to start a business to an entrepreneur who was born to start a business, you have a different relationship to those opportunities, to the risk factors, to the uncertainty, to the curveballs, to the late nights, because it's what you do. See, a chef that's passionate about being a chef can cook for 30 different people and not taste one of the meals. That would be awful to somebody like me. If I spend the time cooking, I want to enjoy what I cook. But a chef is doing it for a different reason, a different passion. That's their what we call a vocation and avocation. Whereas for me, building a business is my passion. I can work 130 odd hours a week on something that I'm really excited about, that I have no guarantee is going to work, but it's making that happen. So that attitude, that mindset is way more important than a checklist of certificates from some business school to try to help you have more certainty because you don't know how to handle uncertainty because you never decided to be an actual entrepreneur. How's that?
You've mentored high-level entrepreneurs globally. What's the most common mindset block that you see even the most successful ones struggle with?
Two things. One is the ability to handle uncertainty. Right? Yeah. The other tends to be getting into a routine of things that work, and therefore you're more committed to the things that are working now or used to work than adapting to circumstance or situation. Meaning that, if you're comfortable in your business, in your project, in what have you, there's no real requirement to adapt. So, the dinosaurs died because they'd never had to adapt to an ice age, right? So if you have an understanding that the people say the opposite of great is like poor. You do something in a great way, you do something in a poor way. No, the opposite of great isn't poor. If you have a poor lifestyle, if you have a poor emotional experience, you're motivated to do something about it. If you got a poor bank account, you're motivated to get off your butt and hustle.
Yes.
But the opposite of great is good. Because when you feel comfortable, when everything's good enough that you don't have to get up early, you don't have to go out hustling, you don't have to follow up on that lead because it's not going to affect if I'm going to eat this week or not. Then you get comfortable. I see a lot of entrepreneurs, if they get to a certain point where they've fought through the uncertainty, they get to a
Yes.
point where it's like, oh, now I can finally relax a bit. They get comfortable. They don't grow anymore. To grow,
It
you
just
need
all
challenge.
falls down.
Yeah, at
Yes.
some point, the universe is going to give you another curveball by design. Because if you think that life is a comfort centric experience, you're going to suffer. If you understand the reality that life is a growth centric experience, you're going to thrive. Now, there's more discomfort in growth by design. If you want to have a better body, what do? You go to the gym and you go through a small amount of discomfort to get a better body. You want to
Yes.
have a better bank account, you go through a smaller amount of uncertainty, commitment, work and discomfort in order to have a healthier financial lifestyle. If you prefer comfort rather than the gym, I can predict what you're going to look like sitting on the couch eating Haagen-Dazs and popcorn. It's not difficult, right? If you prefer the certainty of a paycheck, you're not going to be flying business class. It's
No.
predictable.
In your view, what's the biggest myth people buy into about entrepreneurship that actually sabotages their results?
There's a few. I think one of the biggest myths is that you've got to be cut out for it. Yeah, I need to be cut out. I'm just not cut out for that. Well, what you're saying is I'm not uncomfortable enough to force myself down a path that would require me to master the skills and adapt to becoming an entrepreneur. That's why they
Yeah.
say, necessity is the mother of invention. So one of the myths is that you're not cut out for it, right? There are people with a natural predisposition. I do class myself as a born entrepreneur, right? But there are, I'm not a born guitar player. I've never had a passion to
Right.
pick up a guitar. Does that mean to say I can't learn? But if I thought, oh, well, I'm just not cut out to be a guitar player, that would prevent me from ever needing to or ever wanting to pick it up to learn. But if
Right.
all of a sudden I ended up as part of a group of people and they would meet and play the guitar and I loved the people and the only way I could be with these people is to learn to play the guitar, I'd be motivated to go play the guitar.
That's
So
right.
there's no born entrepreneurs as such, right? There are people that would have a predisposition, right? Just like Eric Clapton or Jimi Hendrix, had a predisposition for being a genius with a guitar. But it doesn't mean to say that they have the monopoly and that just because you weren't born an Eric Clapton doesn't mean to say you can't play the guitar. So if you want to be an entrepreneur, you don't have to think that you need to be a born entrepreneur. You need to adapt to the circumstances required that would allow you to build the muscle that make you a half decent entrepreneur.
You often talk about entrepreneurial alignment. Can you break that down for someone who's chasing success but still feels unfulfilled?
Yeah, your biggest challenge as for most entrepreneurs is that they are seeking either certainty or significance. Certainty of
Right.
having more money, or the significance of thinking when I get enough money, I can buy enough things that'll finally validate me, or whatever.
Yeah.
There is a huge difference between a life chasing success and a life chasing fulfillment. Ultimately, and most people will die before they even realize what I'm saying is true. And that is that when you set a goal, most of the reason you set the goal, if your needs are certainty or significance, what you're saying is, I need to achieve that goal in order for me to give myself permission to feel a certain way that I don't feel right now.
Right.
You're using external rules and values in order to trigger your permission to experience those values or feelings. So when you realize that, I've worked with people that are worth $700 million that are depressed. They're on Prozac.
Yes.
Why? Because they're not a billionaire. Why? Because they thought in order to be successful, happy, validated, and all the rest of it, significant, they needed to be a billionaire. Whereas if I give you $700 million now, OJ, you probably wouldn't be on Prozac.
No.
Right? So, when you realize that fulfillment is really what you're looking for, you're just saying that until I quote unquote successful, even though they haven't got a benchmark for what that actually looks like, I won't choose to feel fulfilled. I'll instead keep chasing success.
How has your personal definition of success evolved from your first business to where you are today with Sage Academy?
It's similar to the lines that I shared earlier. In terms of when I first started, I thought I needed to get $1 million in the bank in order to prove to the world I was good enough. And the reason I
Right.
chased that rabbit was because I thought, yeah, I have a lot of insecurities that I'm not good enough. So I need to go prove to the world that I am. Now, if I didn't have those insecurities in the first place, I wouldn't need to have proven anything. In which case, I was free to build a business and make $1 million, but I wouldn't be doing it out of fear of not doing it. So
Right.
from that side, I realized that fulfillment was more important, right?
Right.
And when you understand that, again, I've worked with people in Africa that have nothing by the definition of what you and I would class as materialism. They don't have money. They probably have one set of clothes, don't have shoes, right? But they are playing in the streets, smiling, doing whatever the kids do, and they're just happy.
Joy in
Yeah,
life, yes.
joy. Why? Because they're fulfilled. Again, I've
Yes.
worked with clients that are massively wealthy and successful, many of them that don't feel fulfilled. One of my clients was one of the most successful people in the entire world in his field. His resume was 96 pages long. He had the
Wow.
penthouse in Manhattan on Fifth Avenue. He had the home in the Hamptons, and came to me because he felt very insecure about the fact that he hadn't achieved enough yet.
Yeah.
Why? What? If you say or think, when I make $1 million, then I'll be happy. Right? I've got news for you. You'll make $1 million and you won't be happy. Do you know why? Because you'll suddenly realize that you'll need $2 million in case you lose the first. And once you
So a
got the 2
bit
million,
more, sorry. What did you say?
then you think when you finally get the second million, you'll realize it's actually five, followed by 10, 20. It never ends.
You just
Feel
never
great
get
now.
fulfilled.
Yeah. Feel great now. Sure as hell beats as a philosophy in life. Feel great when.
Right. So a bit more to mindset and identity. Can you walk us through a moment in your life when your mindset was tested at the highest level, and how did you respond to this circumstance?
Yeah, I believe that we live in a growth centric experience in this playground called Earth School, and
Yeah.
that you're going to get tested. Yeah, there are what I call BLTs or basic life tests to see if you're where you're at, like check-ins, if you like, from the school teachers to see where you're at in class. And then there's graduation events. A graduation
Yeah.
event is a significant emotional event that essentially tests you to the limit. And I've had many graduation events. I did one when I met you. I just come off rowing across the Atlantic to Antigua.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the graduation event that springs to mind for this example would be when I was fighting a civil litigation in court in England over a multi-million dollar business deal that I'd done with $1 billion company years and years before. And they threw a curveball at me. They issued a contempt of court order saying that I'd breached some of the terms and conditions around a court order, which I hadn't. And I looked at it and it was clever. It was, how do you distort context to prove your side of the content? Usual legal tricks, but I really didn't give it much credence.
Okay.
And they sold it to the judge and he gave me 6 months in prison. Never been arrested, never been accused of a crime, still no criminal record with regards to any of that. But I lost everything. I went from a successful business with 50 plus staff to no business and 3 staff in 3 days. I lost everything I had: money, relationship, wedding, like everything. And so at that point, the identity and the mindset training is key. Who do I need to become in that situation in order to thrive in that situation rather than wilt? And I knew if I went down the steps into prison as a victim, as the identity of a prisoner, I'd never recover. Instead, I thought, the universe has got a great sense of humor. I live in a friendly universe. So as a result of that, it's clearly looking after me. So it's found a way to send me into prison without ever being arrested or accused of a crime. And it's going to bring me out again without even having a criminal record, in a way where I can go help people that wouldn't normally be able to see my work or be helped, and test if I'm actually ready enough to walk my talk in this kind of environment. And so instead of choosing the identity of a prisoner, I chose the identity of a secret agent of change. And I went to work, and I was mission driven. I was like undercover. And I ended up getting a lot of the prisoners off drugs. I was stopping suicides. I redesigned the intake system and the entry system for new prisoners to reduce violence between the wings and help more certainty and yada yada. Won a national
Yeah.
award for the work that I did. It's being used in prisons all over the world. In fact, 2 weeks ago, I was speaking in a state penitentiary in Louisiana. And it became one of the greatest experiences of my life. Whereas for some people, it would have been the worst experience. Now, the experience is the experience, right?
And it
I was
builds
in the
you.
same. Yeah, how do you choose to adapt to it? There's prisoners in there that were committing suicide. There were prisoners in there that were depressed. There were prisoners in there that were staying as victim for their whole life. I was in the same prison, eating the same food, breathing the same air, being shouted at by the same guards. Why was my experience so different? Because the mindset and identity that I chose to go in there and hold.
Right. So you teach that life happens for us, not to us. And how can someone begin to actually live from that truth and not just hear it as another cliche?
You've got to understand that Einstein said a very powerful thing. He said the most intelligent, powerful, profound question that a human being can ask or answer in their lifetime is, do we live in a friendly or a hostile universe? Now think about that. If you think you live in a hostile universe, you're going to be looking at everything through a fear-based lens. You're going to be looking out for yourself. You're going to be egocentric. You're going to be selfish to an extent because out of survival.
Yeah.
You believe you live in a friendly universe, everything happens for a reason that serves you. You may not know
For
what
you.
that reason is at the time. It may look as if it's, not under the right kind of scenario or circumstance that you'd wish for, but your muscles don't want the workout. The mindset of the athlete wants the workout. Your muscles are going to send messages to the brain screaming, saying, stop, you're breaking me down. This is painful. So, how do you, which side of the fence do you choose? It's a pretty powerful level of understanding. So, how do you start?
Yes.
You start by asking yourself, do I live in a friendly or hostile universe? Now, the truth is this: you don't actually live in a friendly universe, nor do you live
Not at
in a
all.
hostile universe. What you live in is a self-reflective universe. Two men sat behind prison bars. One saw mud, the other saw stars.
Yes.
And you create your reality. You generate your reality. You and you alone are responsible for how you interpret your reality.
Most people think that their problems are outside of them. What's your process for helping them see that transformation is an inside job?
Well, I said this to my students last night on our EMF call. I run a 6-month program called the Elite Mentorship Forum. We just launched
Right.
EMF 48. And I had our first Q&A call last night. And I said to people, you're on a journey of transformation. Anyone that takes one of my programs is going to transform. The EMF is the most powerful. And so I said to the students last night, some of you are going to want this transformation for your loved ones, for your friends, for your family. Some of you are going to start seeing this information and experiencing the transformation in ways where, wow, you're so excited, you want to give it to the world. I said, you got to understand something. And it took me a long while to know this. What's the first rule of coaching? First rule of coaching is if you want something for somebody more than they want it for themselves, you're wasting your time. You have absolutely no right to change anybody else. You got no right to help anyone else. What do you have a right to do? You have a right to be the example and the invitation, and then let go of what they do with the invitation. That's not your movie. That's their movie. You are not starring in their movie. They are starring in their movie. So if somebody is a negative Norman or a negative Nancy, and they are always looking at the hole in the donut, they're always complaining about something, they're always negative, you may want them because you care about them to be positive, but you don't have any right to take away their negativity. Sometimes people have got to hit their head on the sidewalk to learn how to tie their shoelaces. It's just a fact of life. What you can do is say, hey, I found out that when I walked around with untied shoelaces, I would fall over a lot. And here's how I learned how to tie them. I'm happy to show you how to do it, should you wish. You ask for a permission frame. Would you be open to some feedback? Can I share with you something that worked for me? That's as close as you're going to get to a conversation that isn't loaded with resistance about trying to help somebody else get it. Because once you got it, you got it. It's easy. You see, you can't unsee it. But those that can't see it are on their own journey. And you can send them love, and you can have compassion and empathy, and you can hold a space for them. But you cannot, as I say, you can lead the horse to water. But if you think that in order to get it to drink, you've got to grab it by the neck and shove its face underwater, you're going to lose a lot more friends than you gain. So focus on you being the best version of you in your movie.
Right. For the audience, maybe they'd like to reprogram their subconscious mind. What's a powerful daily habit or practice that you teach that rewires the subconscious mind over time?
Well, you can only wire the subconscious from an alpha brainwave state. Now, I say only, it's the easiest way for people that aren't practicing high levels of personal growth. And if you're practicing high levels of personal growth, you wouldn't need to rewire your mind, right? You'd be in the process of doing it already. Okay.
Yeah.
But I say to people, all the answers are in alpha. The alpha brainwave state is a very powerful brainwave state. It gives you access to information that we would call intuition, hunch, divine, intelligence, whatever it may be. See, if you're stressed, you can't get into alpha. So what do? The mind has to sort through what it already knows, but in different ways. It's like trying to make a new house out of existing bricks. But true new bricks, inspiration, comes from within. And that happens when you drop your brain waves into alpha for a period of time. And you start feeling grateful, and you start expressing love for life, yourself, the world. When you start doing that, you shift frequencies. When you shift frequency on a radio station, you tune into different music. When you shift frequency on your financial station, you'll tune into different income. When you shift frequency on your happiness station, you'll tune into areas where you don't need Prozac, where you're not as bothered when something goes wrong. Making sense?
Okay. So, spiritual intelligence and conscious growth. How do you balance the masculine drive for business growth with the feminine energy of surrender and trust?
Now, when you recognize you're in a partnership,
Okay.
the partnership with the universe.
Right.
You don't sit and meditate and expect checks in the mail, right? All you're going to get is an eviction notice. So you've got to do your part. So the drive is acting on the information that you receive from your downloads, from your intuitions, from your inspiration, your eureka idea moments, all that kind of stuff. So it's a
Okay.
partnership. You've got to be calm enough, yeah, loving enough, humble enough to be friendly to the universe's core frequency so that you can hear the messages coming in. Again, ideas,
Right.
inspiration, gut feel, hunch, download, call it what you wish. It's a label. But you've also got to be hustle minded enough to take the blueprints that you're given and build a house that matches. So, yeah, feminine and masculine, it's a dance. That's what the yin yang symbol is. It's non separation of a dance in the forever circle.
Yeah. You said that our outer world is a reflection of our inner world, right?
Yes.
How does someone begin to master that mirror consciously?
It's not about mastering it, it's about being aware of it.
Awareness.
All right. If you've got chaos in the outer world, check your thinking. If you're thinking in a chaotic state, the outer world is going to appear as chaos. If you're thinking in a calm state and the outer world appears as chaos, then it's not chaos, it's continuity. It's rearranging itself into a place where it's more in alignment with what it is you say you want.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Makes sense. So for someone who's hit rock bottom emotionally or financially, what would be your first words of guidance to them?
Hmm. A new future is always available. Understand that circumstances never define you. They always give you the opportunity to define yourself.
Right.
And we're still living in a time in human history that I don't care how bad you think you've got it. There are people centuries ago that would swap places with you in a heartbeat. There are people 2 generations ago that'll swap places with you in a heartbeat. You know, our grandparents or great grandparents, they never had, voice activated smartphones. They could never wake up and have breakfast in Paris, lunch in London, and dinner in freaking New York. That's it. It was unheard of. So yeah, lots of things to be grateful for.
Okay, vision, legacy, and humanity. So, you know, you're working on Sage Academy and the EMF continuously. What's your biggest intention behind these two programs, and what change would you like to create in the world through this work?
Well, it ties in because the reason I do this is to essentially raise the global consciousness of humanity. See, I can predict your life based upon a couple of things. It's like, how do you do that? You don't know me. No, I don't need to know your background. I don't need to know your preferences. I don't need to know your motivation strategies. I just simply need to know what your level of consciousness is. I can
Right.
predict quality of your life from that. If you're a person who is essentially calibrating consistently at anger, yeah, I can predict your life. I can predict the sad life of your partner. If you're a person who calibrates more at a level of consciousness of acceptance, you're going to go with the flow. You're not going to get ruffled feathers when something doesn't happen the way you want it to do. If you calibrate at guilt, you're going to attract far more things in your life that are going to justify you to feel guilty about. So, yeah, it's easy to predict people based upon the one thing that is primary, which is your consciousness and how far evolved or unevolved that is based upon your level of emotional, spiritual maturity. And there's a lot of emotional teenagers running around in some pretty old bodies. You probably noticed that.
I do, sadly.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, what is my purpose? I right now is to raise the global consciousness of humanity. If more people can get exposed to my work and can transform, you help the world one person at a time.
Even locals are beginning to get inspired by your work, you know? So that's amazing.
That is
But
that's very humbling.
Yes.
And thank you for sharing that. But that's
Yes.
it underpins the opportunity we all have to make a difference.
Right.
Right. All I did was ask you a question on the boat.
Yeah.
Right. Do you remember the question? It
Yeah.
says how open to be.
What do you inspire and what are your aspirations in life? Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah. What are
And I
your
told you.
inspirations?
Yeah.
You want to be an entrepreneur.
Yeah. Now,
Right?
what made you ask me that question?
Intuition.
Intuition.
I was in Alpha. I spent a lot of time there.
Okay. So to wrap it up, you had 60 seconds to pass down your life's core message to the next generation of entrepreneurs. What would you say?
Don't let anyone ever put limitations on you. They have no right to do it. And most people that complain or tell you you can't are simply projecting their own level of insecurities. There's two ways to have the tallest building in town. You can either concentrate on how high you can build your building, or you can concentrate on tearing down everybody else's building that looks taller than yours. If
Okay.
you want to become the best version of yourself, concentrate on building your building and understand that life is a growth centric experience. It's not a comfort centric experience. Doesn't mean to say you can't be comfortable, yeah, but don't seek comfort. Allow you to expand your comfort zone so far that most of what other people would call hardship, you still experience as comfort. And that's one of the reasons I chose to row across the Atlantic, because it expands the comfort zone of what's possible in your own mind, so that people looking at that will think, wow, it's like if he can do that, I can go do 5 kilometers. He rode 5,500. All right. It's a contrast frame to show people what's possible, because you should never, ever, ever let anybody else steal your dream. Think big, believe that it's possible, live in a friendly universe as your choice and your birthright to do so. Go swing the bat and know that you were born good enough and there's nothing left to prove. So now you can just go out and enjoy being who you are.
Thank you so much for your wisdom and years of experience that you just shared across our audience today. It's been amazing. I learned something new today. And thank you, Peter.
You're very, very welcome, OJ. I'm so excited and proud of being able to hold up a mirror to remind you of how great you are. And I see something in you that I see rarely in young individuals, that have that spark, that desire, that, I want to go out and make a difference. I want to go and do something that allows me to live the life I was born to live and not settle for the one that I was expected to live.
Thank you, Peter. Kind words.
Keep doing what you're doing.
All right.